With 29 games to go, we're going to be looking at the players that the Chicago Bulls should be evaluating the most, and also what is the biggest question that the Chicago Bulls will need to answer in this upcoming offseason. This is your host, Rico Greenhowe, and you have found yourself on another episode of Bulls Digest. And so today, we are looking at just what the Chicago Bulls need to do as far as evaluating players who really are the most important players to evaluate as this team continues to try to really rebuild this roster and get it back into contention again. And then we're going to be looking at just, I think, the biggest question that the Chicago Bulls are certainly going to have to answer as they approach the offseason here. And so before we go ahead and jump into that, wanted to let you know that about 62.3% of you that watch are not subscribed to the channel. So make sure that you go ahead and you slam dunk on that subscribe button like Modest Buzelis as we try to go out there and reach our end of the season subscriber goal. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the content for today. And I wanted to start off with the most important players that will need to be evaluated during this 29 game period here that we have left in the season. And so I want to start with Modest Buzelis. I think that he is absolutely one of the most important, if not the most important player that has to be evaluated here because he is your rookie. I'm pretty sure that I think the Chicago Bulls are not going to move on from him. I mean, anything can happen, but I think that for the most part, he's with you. And I think now that we are starting to see Modest Buzelis, play some more here, you're starting to see some real signs of him being a real serious contributor to this team, depending on how they build this thing out. And I think for Modest Buzelis, I think now in this 29 game period, one of the things that I'm looking to see is just, can he be a star or is he going to be a role player? Because here's the deal. Whatever the ceiling is for Modest Buzelis, I think it's time that we build him a new house because he's going to absolutely break through that ceiling. Look, over his last games, so many games or so, he's had 6 games where he's had double-digit figures in those games as far as points scored. He's averaging 16.7 points a game, 1.7 blocks a game, 0.7 steals, and then also 3.3 rebounds a game. More importantly, he's shooting 46.2% from 3 right now. I know it is a small sample size, but he's playing 28.7 minutes. We've seen him come off the bench, and now we're starting to see him start. And I think you're trying to figure out, is he going to be a legitimate star or is he going to be a role player? But also, what is his natural position? Is he going to be a power forward? Is he a small forward? Is he a point forward? Is he an everything? I don't know. This is something that you have to figure out because as you figure that out, that's going to also get the Chicago Bulls to think a little bit more critically about what players that you bring in because you don't want anybody to get in the way of that growth and development, especially if you feel like he's going to be a major piece, which I absolutely think he is. I think we all saw that from day one when he started with this in the summer league, that he has the it factor. And I love the edge that he brings to this team with the identity. And I love the fact that he's an absolute sponge. One of the things that they talked about with him is that he struggled shooting the 3-point shot. You can tell that he's absolutely worked on it. He's got the confidence. And I've said this before, it's something where I knew it wasn't broke as far as the way his form looked. It was a matter of just seriously believing in it, getting with Coach Patton, and you see the results. And I love the fact now we are also seeing Modest Buzelis put the basketball on the floor. It's not like they're running plays for him. He is not just standing in the corner. So this guy is showing us something that he has figured it out. And he is a player that we absolutely must invest in and envision and just kind of see a little bit more as to what he possibly could be for this franchise. Because once this thing gets turned around, I think that Modest Buzelis is going to be a huge factor for you. And with that being said, that moves me to the next player that I think is super important to evaluate over these last 29 games. And it starts with Josh Giddey because Josh Giddey is headed to the negotiation table with you. I think that, the Chicago Bulls are absolutely going to re-sign him. And I think that they see him as the lead guard and they see him as a cornerstone piece for this franchise. And look, what he does well is he distributes the basketball at a high level. You see the assist. He definitely hits the rebounds hard, and he has the ability to get downhill, get to the rim, right, draw the contact and things like that. I think defensively, he's starting to compete a bit more as well, so I liked what I'm seeing there. And what it comes down to with Josh Giddey and this situation and evaluating him, you want to find out more as to how you can maximize his strengths, and you also want to minimize his weaknesses. I think that is going to be key when it comes down to evaluating him and when you're really putting the roster together. Because now when you're trying to maximize his strengths, that means you need to get players around him that can absolutely shoot the basketball. You need to get players around him that can defend at a high level, because we know he's not the best one-on-one on-ball defender, but he's given us that effort. But you need to get that. You need to get some more size and length to give you that rim protection, right? That's something that we love with Modest Buzelis, but we need more of that. And then you need to get somebody that, perhaps could come off the bench as well and come in, because, there might be situations where Josh Giddey is not going to close the game. We've seen Billy Donovan do that before. So you cannot, end up losing the basketball game because you had to sit him. You have to go out there and make sure that you load up the roster accordingly. And that also means, too, that if Billy Donovan is going to stay with this team, he needs to also now make those adjustments for these players that need to be evaluated so we can maximize their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. And so as much as this comes down to personnel, this also is going to come down to the coaching and also to just the front office vision to put the appropriate players in the right place, in the right system, in order for these players to really take off with this team and just really turn it around. So I think that those are the two most important players, definitely, that the Chicago Bulls should be looking at over the last 29 games as far as evaluation is concerned. And so that leads me now to the next point here, as far as the biggest questions for this franchise, and I think something that they are going to have to really take a look at over the offseason. And it starts with this situation around Coby White and Ayo Dosunmu. I think it's no big secret that we all know the 140 extension, rule is coming up, meaning that the Chicago Bulls are going to have to really pay, a pretty penny for their services at the end of the day. Because right now, when you look at Ayo, you look at Coby White, those players are on team-friendly deals. You have Coby White at $12 million and you have Ayo at $7 million. Now, I have been in the camp with I like both of these players. I think that when you look at Coby, you look at Ayo, what they have done is they have figured it out, right? Because that's the biggest deal when you come here to Chicago. These guys have been thrown into just different roles. They've had different situations, whether it's injuries or whatever the case may be. And both of these players have always came out on top. And I absolutely love Coby in the fact that he has been a terrific combo guard for us. We know that he can be a clutch performer. We saw that with DeMar DeRozan last season. He was so close to being the most improved player of the year last season behind Tyrese Maxey. And Ayo, you have got to love Ayo and his ability to be a combo guard as well. He's shown us that he can knock down the three ball. He shows us that he can guard at a high level, multiple positions, and he is definitely a glue guy for you as far as distributing the basketball, getting people into offense and things like that. Both of these players, I think, are leaders for you, and you're going to have to make a tough decision. And so I understand from the business standpoint what the Bulls are going to have to do, but if you're going to do this, you need to get ahead of that decision, because that is going to certainly impact how you shape out this roster. Because if you're keeping both, then you need to make sure that you go out there, you get the players to kind of put out there around these guys, and you figure out, are you starting them? Are you coming off the bench with one? What are you doing? Because I feel like it has been really seriously just a juggling act with what you really want to do with these players. And so that is one of the biggest questions that I think the Bulls are going to have to really address here in the offseason. Next up, I think that this is pretty much, it's just a foregone conclusion that this has to happen. It's the biggest question, and this also too goes into, I think, the player development, but the roster construction, right? Like, that is going to be seriously something that the Bulls are going to have to address, because when we look at last night's game, we look at, Kevin Huerter, we look at Trey Mann, and we look at their production. It just was not very good. And the thing with Cal Huerter or Kevin Huerter, excuse me, is that Kevin Huerter comes off of screens, right? He's a player that he comes off down screens, things like that. Our offense really, it's not geared like that. And so he struggled out there, didn't see Billy Donovan make those adjustments. Then when you look at Trey Jones is a natural point guard. The problem is you have many guards. You have many, point guards and guards on this team. And you have to figure out now, where is he going to be in the long-term thing if you're wanting to extend him? And he didn't look very comfortable in last night's game. I know it's the first game for both of them. And they actually played over Dalen Terry and Julian Phillips. And talking about earning minutes, Julian Phillips and Dalen Terry have been with you since training camp. They have gone through this really mess here in Chicago. And you need to evaluate them and figure out if you're going to keep them or you're going to move on. And same with these players here, but I thought that they had definitely deserved some minutes last night, and they outplayed both of these new players that came to us. I get it was the first game, and then I know that you need size on this team. You have Zach Collins on the sidelines. He's available, and then you have Billy Donovan, who was reluctant to put him into a lineup or give him a try, which then poses the question that the Bulls have got a serious roster construction issue. They've got to figure out, who do you want to move on with, or who do you want to move away from? Like, that is something that seriously has to happen over these next 29 games or so. You cannot just continue to go out there and then just throw a whole bunch of lineups out there, not really evaluate and understand who is going to stay with you and who you're going to move on from. Jalen Smith is another guy that I think is very interesting to take a look at, because if we do move on from Vooch here in the offseason, which I think it is going to happen, at what point in time are you going to do something maybe like you've done with Modest Buzelis and throw him out there in the starting lineup with Josh Giddey, with Modest Buzelis? Doesn't it make sense to give him a start with players that he potentially could be having to start with next season? It all comes down to the foundation and what you are doing with this team, because when we look at this roster, going off of what AK is talking about, where he's saying, look, he wants to bring in players that have the 3, 4, 5 years of experience. Look, you have 12 players that have 3 years or more, and then you have 9 players listed as a point guard or a 2 guard, and literally you have got to figure out what you're going to do with this roster. So that goes in hand with what we're talking about as far as evaluating and things like that. So anyway, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think that, yes, Josh Giddey and also Modest Buzelis are certainly maybe the most important pieces to evaluate down the stretch of this season? Do you feel like, yes, maybe one of the biggest questions here going into the offseason is, what are you going to do with the Coby White and Ayo Dosunmu situation there? Are you keeping them? Are you moving on from them? And if you are moving on, are you ready to go out there and maximize Coby White or Ayo, if that is the case, and get the max return here? Because that is absolutely what this team is going to need to do as far as draft capital is concerned if you're going to make that move. And then lastly, with the roster construction, are you, thinking that, yes, the Bulls are going to absolutely have to, evaluate what you're going to do with some of these players that you've come over and brought via trade, and then also, too, the players that were already here? Do you package them up in a deal? How are you going to part ways here? I think that is something that the Bulls are certainly going to have to do, but let me know in the comments. Just want to thank everybody out there for liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. It means a lot to us here at Bulls Digest as we try to reach our end of the season subscriber count. And so, look, I just want to leave with the fact that the bottom line is this: even though you moved on from Zach LaVine, you've got control of your picks back. Congratulations, but you still have a lot of work. And AK in this front office, look, they cannot afford to stand still in the offseason. And I would venture to say that I think these last 29 games might be maybe more important than the first half of the season here, because I think that the offseason is going to come around very quickly, and you really need to have a plan of action and understand what you're going to do. And I'm not talking about just one move ahead. You need to be looking at the chessboard for 4 or 5 moves ahead. That's something that I think that this front office has really struggled with. So anyway, let me know in the comments. And even though it looks like it's going to be challenging for the Bulls, and it might be a minute until we see a contender again, and I'm talking about a team that can actually win the NBA championship, I'm still saying it's going to be all right, and go Bulls. I'll see you on the next one. All right, peace.